Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/IDontWorkHereLady, where Karens mistake regular customers as employees, and the stories are freaking hilarious. And in today's episode, Karens are at it again, making ridiculous mistakes. And Opie tells a story about the time a Karen attacks him, thinking he's an employee, and it's the biggest mistake of her life. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. A few weeks ago, I was visiting my local big box bookstore. I was looking for good clearance items before the store closed permanently, as the mall it was attached to was being demolished. The store has no dress code, but the employees do wear lanyards, and I wasn't. So there I was, browsing around my preferred sci-fi section when I need to use the nearby restroom. So I head in that direction, which happened to also be next to the mid-store customer service counter. As I'm literally a few feet away from the door, that's when Karen notices me and she positions herself directly in front of me, blocking my path to my urinary destination. She then says to me, "Nuh-uh, you're not going anywhere. I don't know why you don't keep that desk staffed. I really need your help finding blah 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 book. Are you going to help me or not?" I reply, "Not," remembering the urgency of my business, and I step around her with the variation of "I don't work here." I continue to my destination, thinking that's the end of the encounter. Well, I soon find out it's not to be. I can hear the woman's voice rising in pitch and volume, on its way to full Karen Banshee, as she follows me inside the men's restroom. And I'm convinced that she was about to grab my arm and pull me around to face her. Now, being conscious of social norms about public exposure, I make it inside a stall and then lock the door for privacy. But that didn't stop Karen from knocking on the stall door and threatening to get me fired before she heard the really solid stream hitting the water. And that's when I'm convinced she realized for the first time what she had done. I heard her embarrassed sounding huff, mumbling something about getting a manager, and then she hightails it out of there. I just finished doing my thing and washed my hands, and I came out to witness her being escorted out of the store by a properly lanyarded employee. I only caught the tail end of the conversation, where Karen states she's never coming back here again, and the employee had the classic response of, "Well, neither am I. We're closing for good, ma'am." Oh man, I've read a ton of these stories, guys, but the stuff some people do still leave me shocked sometimes. Like the audacity of that woman to not only block OP from entering the washroom, but to then follow OP into the men's washroom. And I also can't believe she started banging on the stall door, demanding service, and then threatening a manager, like, take a hint, lady. And even if OP was an employee, I think we can all agree that what she did was highly inappropriate. Like, whatever book you're looking for can wait, Karen, you silly, silly person. But hey, entitlement knows no bounds, right? And if you think that was ridiculous, listen to this next post, guys. So last summer, a friend and I worked together in a national park. There was a semi-large fire for a while that put us out of work. After the fire was contained and we returned to work, one day, we decided to go for a drive to check out the damage. We pulled over at what used to be a well-known historic inn, which had a small convenience store with a single gas pump out front. Of course, the inn and the store were made of wood, so they were completely incinerated, right along with the trees in the area. While we're there exploring, looking in disbelief at the huge amount of melted glass and rubble that used to be a store, a full car with a family of 5 pulls up right to the pump. The pump is the only thing left standing anywhere around. I don't know how it still stood. The dad that was driving starts asking us if the pump takes debit. Now, we were taken aback by this question because it was very clearly not an operating gas station. There was no building, just burnt trees, rubble, and a blackened gas pump. My friend just took the reins on this one and explained to him that there's no gas due to the fire here, and the gas station was burnt to the ground, clearly. Well, the guy completely ignored her attempt to explain the obvious situation and instead looked to me and said, "How do I pay for gas?" I told him, "You can't. This is no longer a functioning pump, and it doesn't work." At that, the guy becomes extremely angry, and he says, "But my GPS told me this was a gas station, so where's the gas station?" My friend and I just look at him, and we answer in perfect unison, "We're standing on it." Despite all of this, the guy doesn't seem to be able to grasp what we're saying. He starts complaining, now angrily, that his kids had to use the bathroom, and that he needed gas badly as he was running on empty. Now, there wasn't another gas station until all the way back where he came from, which was roughly 20 miles through the twisty mountain roads. And the guy not only refused to believe the gas pump didn't work, he literally gets out of his vehicle and he had to try for himself, all while continuing to complain how ridiculous it is that we're telling him he can't get gas. We just stood there and we watched him realize that there was no debit card slot on this old burnt down gas pump, and that's when he really lost it. He then starts screaming at us that we're all useless, and if his family dies out here, it's all our fault. He gave us both a menacing look as if it were our fault, or like we were playing some sort of a prank on him. I think it must have dawned on him that we worked in the area, since we knew so much about it. He then gets mad and demands to know where we work, seeing as how we were so unhelpful with his problem. We told him too, like what's he gonna do? We then directed him to turn around and go back to where we work, where he most likely started his journey that day, since there was literally nowhere else for him to go. And the situation would have been hilarious if he wasn't so angry about it. Finally, the guy realizes this is going nowhere and he gets back in the car and speeds off, continuing on in the wrong direction on a road that led to nothing, not even taking our advice. We still laugh about the sheer stupidity of this man. They most definitely ran out of gas, and I guarantee they had no cell service that deep in the woods. My goodness, guys, are you shaking your heads as hard as I am with this post? Like, how can some people be so frickin' dense? Like, listen to the people who are telling you to look around. Everything is scorched. You can't get gas. I just love how his argument is, if the GPS says it's a gas station, it has to be a damn gas station. There's no way it can't be burnt to the ground. Like, this man probably has no survival instincts at all. And this person comments, and one time, my GPS directed me to a Starbucks that ended up being a drug house. That doesn't mean I walked up to the front door demanding they make me a frappuccino. But yeah, with that said, some people do see red when they're in that state, and you can't tell them anything. I just hope they ended up okay since he had his family with him. The kid shouldn't have to suffer just because dad's an idiot and won't take advice, right? This happened about 15 years ago, and I hope you'll share it, as it's kind of an I do work here situation. I actually found my original interview notes from this encounter. So here goes. On this day, I'm driving back to the office after a hasty lunch. I've spent the entire morning interviewing candidates for a vacancy in my team, and I've got a full afternoon of interviews lined up. As I drive up to the parking lot, this obnoxious dude cuts right in front of me, causing me to slam the brakes hard to avoid hitting his car. I then smacked my horn and gave him an exasperated what the F looks, and he looks right back at me through his rearview mirror. The guy just ignores me and he proceeds to turn into our parking lot. He then pulls into my designated parking spot and I pull alongside him. That's when I say to him, "Hey, you really need to watch how you drive. You almost hit me." The guy then rolls down his window and he extends a middle finger, with loud music emanating from his car. He then proceeds to rev his engine and he yells back, "Go F yourself." Now, if this was any other day, I'd be getting ready to respond in kind, but I've got my afternoon schedule packed full of interviews, and I don't have the time or patience to deal with this guy. I just shake my head in frustration and I move my car a couple of spots away, just in case this idiot decides to do something to my car. I then figure that this is the end of my interaction with him and I rush into the office to begin the afternoon. Our office manager notices that I'm kind of bothered and asked if I'm okay. I explain what transpired in the parking lot and quickly brush it off. Now, the office manager is kind of like a mother to me and very protective. I assure her that I'm fine and she can send the next candidate to my office. About an hour later, I'm between interviews when I hear a knock on my door. It's the office manager with a knowing look on her face. She says to me, "Hey, I think that guy's lined up for the next interview," to which I say, "Send him in." Office manager flashes that same knowing look and nods. And this is gonna be interesting. A few seconds later, the idiot walks through the door and seats himself down in the chair. He doesn't recognize me at first, but I just stare at him for a bit before saying, "That was quite the interaction we had in the parking lot." And that's when he realizes who I am. Cue the awkward silence. He then sputters and says, yeah, about what happened. So yeah, in the parking lot, I was in a rush. It was the stress of the interview, and you just got in my way. Hearing him say that, I'm thinking, amazing. This guy doesn't even have the decency to apologize. He then begins to tell me how he's such a good fit for the role, and that in his opinion, I need to stop interviewing other candidates immediately because he's the most qualified. He then starts listing his credentials, and I keep a blank face throughout the interview and just look at him. The guy was talking like 99% of the time. Now, I don't consider myself a mean person, but it is an absolute joy seeing him squirm in the seat in front of him. I just wait for another uncomfortably long pause before leaning forward across the table, and the guy cringes back in his seat. I then say to him, your interview began in the parking lot, and I'm happy to say that you will not be getting the job. I don't want a person like you on my team. I don't think you're a good fit. At that, the idiot sags visibly, and he retreats from the room. The office manager's head pops in my doorway 5 minutes later with a huge grin on her face. And for the rest of my time at that job, the office manager would bring it up every now and then, and we would have a big laugh about it. This experience has taught me to always be humble and gracious to other people, and also not be a jackass on the road. That's instant karma right there. And guys, the fact that he did that to OP and was then so confident that he was the one for the job and then told OP to cancel all the other interviews, like this dude clearly lives in his own world where he's the main character. And it's so cringy. Like, forget apologizing for what I did. I'm the absolute best hire. Like, yeah, that's why you didn't get the job, right? And this person shares their comments and they say, I worked as HR at Toys R Us for a while. Around the holidays one year, an awful woman came up to the customer service desk where I was working at the time, and she asked if she could have a job application. I said we didn't do paper applications and directed her to apply online. Like, come on, it was 2009. The lady then immediately got aggressive and she screamed at me about not knowing computers and how she can't be expected to go online for a job and how I was lying to her. She then demanded to speak to the hiring manager. And it felt great to say, I'm the hiring manager, and there will never be a job here for you. So yeah, the lesson here is just be nice to the people you interact with, right? Like, I can't believe some people don't understand that concept. Kindness does go a long way. And guys, if you think that was satisfying, listen to this next one where Karen makes the biggest mistake of her life. A while ago, while I was on my break, I was shopping in the electronics store directly next to the store I work at. I was wearing the store uniform, which is a very distinctive red and khaki with a jacket on top, as well as my name tag, which very clearly states what store I work at. Anyways, enter this crazy mom and her 4 kids. I hear this piercing whistle from behind me a few times, so I look over my shoulder because it was loud. And this lady is barreling towards me with her kids in tow. As I turn to her to see what the hustle and whistling was about, she then goes to grab my wrist and she knocks the phone out of my hand. I then look down and I can see glass shards everywhere as my phone is smashed to hell. So I give her the classic, "What the F, lady?" To which she responds by screaming that employees should not be texting while working, and that I should be ashamed of keeping her waiting because I was texting. I then turned to walk away, and that's when she kicked my ankle as I was walking away. I tripped, sprained my ankle, face planted, and nailed my shoulder on the shelving. That's when her kids start laughing and pointing at me. That's when an employee arrives and was able to help me up to see if I was okay. The woman finally thinks for a second, and a whole new look comes over her face as she realized I don't work at this store in the first place. Then another new look as I told the employee to call the police because she assaulted me. She then starts pleading with me that it was just a mistake and that she was having a bad day. Long story short, she was arrested on assault charges and eventually had to replace my phone. She was also given 350 hours of community service. And my personal favorite is that she has to pay for and attend therapy sessions on account of her rage issues. Can't say she didn't deserve that, right? And seriously, what a pathetic excuse. I was having a bad day. That's why I smacked the phone out of your hand, yelled at you, and then kicked your feet from under you as you were walking away. Please, it was a mistake. Guys, I am just so glad that crazy lady's kids were there to see their mom begging not to be arrested and then having to pay for her actions, because clearly they weren't learning anything good from her, so they needed to see that. I worked in a restaurant a few years ago that was located just outside of a mall. The day this happened, it was a major shopping holiday, so management expected a large turnout to the restaurant and they had a ton of servers working the morning shift to handle the workload. The only problem was that everyone was in the mall and hardly anyone comes to the restaurant. Most of the staff were standing around, and I decided I wanted a milkshake from the coffee shop nearby. I asked around for anyone who wanted something, and I got this order of maybe 6 drinks, each with their own requirements. I wrote down the orders and went to the coffee shop. Now, the coffee shop was at an intersection inside the mall, and it was absolutely mobbed. The line wrapped around the corner. So I waited, placed my order, and several minutes later, my drinks came up. I brought them over to the prep station that has all the sugars and creamers and began making everyone's coffee. I pulled out my slip of paper and the first coffee gave me a problem. My coworker wanted 4 packets of sugar, and I looked at the sugar caddy and it was empty. I looked over to the counter and the employees were super busy as they were swamped. Blenders are going, beans are being ground, the employees are shouting lingo back and forth to one another. They looked panicked. I then glanced back at the prep station and it's atop some cabinets. And I thought to myself, if I worked here, I would put all the extra stuff for this station in these cabinets. It felt foolish of me to go bother an employee to break them out of their rhythm, all to have them come move something from my knees to my hips. So I knelt down and opened the cabinet. Jackpot, sugar packets. And that's when I hear a voice behind me say, "Do you work here?" I say to her, "No, I don't." At this point, I want to mention that I'm dressed as a waiter, in all black, wearing a black apron with red lettering on it. The same lady says, "Well then, what do you think you're doing?" At this point, I actually looked at her, thinking that she might work here. I guess I'm kind of rummaging through the cabinets, and that might not be cool. I just saw that she was some lady though, so I went back to my mission of grabbing a bunch of packets and restocking them. I say to her, "I was just looking for some sugar, I'm gonna restock it, nothing to it." I then grab a handful of packets and restock the empty black tray, thinking that's the end of it, but of course it wasn't. The lady then says to me, "So tell me, why do you think you can do that? There are employees right over there. Go get one of them to do it. You really should have asked. It's their job. You really should have told them. If they aren't gonna stay on top of this, then someone really should let them know. If they're too busy, then they should have more people working here." The woman then points to a girl who's behind the counter, and she says to me, "That one's not even working. You should have asked her. I'm gonna go let them know." She then takes a few steps forward before turning back around at me, and she says, "You know, it really bugs me that you did this. You shouldn't be. You could have put anything in that cabinet. You could be stocking poison packets for all we know, trying to kill innocent people." And that was the gist of her tirade. I offered almost nothing in my defense but stammers that were immediately cut off. She then told me to wait where I am because she's gonna go get the manager, and if I dare leave, she'll call the cops. She then walks away and she cut right to the front of the line, in front of like 20 people. I noticed the other types of sugar were low, so I restocked them too, and then went back to making my coworkers coffees. I finish up, and as I'm walking away, I hear her again. She says, "Hey, that's him right there, stop him." I turned on my heels to face this random do-gooder Karen and a dead-eyed employee. The employee says to me, "Sir, did you go into the cabinet and, restock the sugar?" I replied, "Yeah." The employee then says, "And are you leaving?" I replied, "Yes." The employee then says, "Okay, then I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." I say to him, "Right." And the Karen looked so pleased with herself. I think the nuance of the null interaction I had with the employee went right over her head. But that's not the worst part. The woman then takes out her phone and she snaps a picture of me saying, "If anyone from this coffee shop dies, we'll know it was you." I didn't want to argue, and I was already late going back, but it made me super angry to see her smug smile and sense of self-satisfaction. It ends there, and I'm sorry if that was a bit anticlimactic. Holy guys, was that lady ever annoying. Like, I would have been so mad if I were in OP's shoes, and a simple task of restocking sugar packets turned into that. They say no good deed goes unpunished. Like accusing a random person of stocking poison packets and then snapping a picture of them. Yeah, OP should have done what that last Karen did and just slapped the phone right out of her hands. And don't even get me started on this Karen logic. The employees are all busy, but let's go bug one to come away from their busy job to kick out a helpful customer who didn't want to wait the 10 minutes it would have taken to get an employee's attention to restock the sugar packets. Some people, I tell you. I work in an architecture firm in a large building that also contains many other types of professional offices. My office is on an upper floor in a corner, so it's not a logical place for people to go first when they come to our building and don't know where they're going. Nevertheless, it has a door directly to a main corridor, so lost people occasionally knock on it, which is why we have a sign on it with the name of our firm and directing people to our receptionist on the 3rd floor. Alas, this sign did not deter this middle-aged, impatient lost lady and her husband from knocking on my door. So the lady knocks and says, "Is this the doctor's office?" I replied, "No, this is an architecture firm." She then says, "How do I get to the doctor's office?" I replied, "There's building directories in the stairs and at the elevator." I then start giving her directions to the stairs and elevator, but she interrupts. The lady gets all huffy and impatient, and she pushes her way past me, right into the middle of my office. And she says, "Why can't you just tell me where the doctor's office is?" I replied, "I'm sorry, but there's a lot of offices in this building, including at least 10 doctor's offices, and I don't know their floors or office numbers." She then says, "Can't you call and find out?" I say I would be happy to let you use my phone. She then interrupts and says, "Why can't you call?" Me, sensing that I'm not gonna get rid of her unless I call somebody, say, "What's the doctor's name? Do you have a number?" She then says, "I don't remember his name. I have a 2:15 appointment. I'm gonna be late." Now I want to note that this is not an elderly woman, and I just wasn't getting the sense that this was a confused old person with a memory issue. I'm still trying to be nice and helpful, even if it's to get her out of my office. I reply, "I'm sorry, but without a name or number, I don't think I can call the doctor's office for you. Maybe I can Google this address and see what doctor's offices show up, and that will jog your memory." She then says, "I don't have time for this. Call the building manager." I then explained to the woman that I don't have the contact information for building management, and there is no staffed main office in this building. We're then back to there's nothing I can do, except suggest that she walk down the hall and check the building directory at the stairs. Her husband's trying to drag her in that direction, but she's not having it. She just screams at me and says, "You are the worst receptionist. Businesses don't know how to get good people these days. I'm going to tell the doctor about you." That's when I say to her, "I'm sorry, but I'm not the receptionist, and I don't work for your doctor. I'm an architect. You're in my office." Our firm's receptionist is on the 3rd floor, as the sign on my door says. She then says, "Well then why didn't you say so? I'll go wait down there." I say to her, "Wait for what? We're an architecture firm. Our receptionist works for this architecture firm. We have nothing to do with the doctor's offices or any other companies in the building." She then huffs and says, "You call her and you tell her I'm on my way down there." At this point, her husband seems to be grasping that I and my office and my firm have nothing to do with her doctor, whose name escapes her, and he starts explaining it to her. She of course brushes him off and yells at me again to call my receptionist. So I dial the receptionist with a lady standing there. I say a couple's on their way down, but they're looking for a doctor's office in the building, and I hope they'll read the building directory in the stairs on their way down. The lady then says to me, "Well, I never." And note, I have never before actually heard that phrase used in real life. I thought it was reserved for caricatures of uptight, entitled old women on TV, like Nellie Olson's mother. The woman then flounced down the hall dragging her husband. Now I thought that since they had to use the stairs or elevator to get to the reception area, that they would see the directory on their way down, and it would jog their memory as to which doctor they were looking for, and it would tell them where to find that doctor. But no, the woman finds her way down to pester our receptionist and told her that I was a horrible employee and that she was reporting me to the state medical board. Now, I do feel bad about pushing her off on the receptionist, but that wasn't deliberate. I was just trying to explain that my office wasn't reception, and that it even said so on my door. I thought that once they got to the stairs that they would read the frickin' directory and they would go where they belong. But no, that didn't work. My receptionist knows the rest of the building tenants better than I though, and she was able to send her somewhere. I don't know if where she got sent was correct, but she didn't find her way back to us. Again, some people don't listen at all, hey? I just feel so bad for the husband having to deal with her all the time. And just watch, she dials the wrong number and calls a pizza joint to report OP. I wouldn't be surprised. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/IDontWorkHereLady. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I hope you didn't shake your heads too hard. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/pro revenge episode. I haven't done those in a while, where a psycho landlord sets OP's home on fire for no frickin' reason. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.